And I think our next book is very well known to a lot of you. I think you will know her, a lot of you will know her, and some of you as parents might have bought some of her books. She's 7 beautiful parenting books available, lovely pictures and all. And our next speaker is Professor Amy Brown. And Amy is a psychologist. Amy is a professor of child public health, and she works in the policy and social sciences at Swansea University in the United Kingdom. And she leads in the new research centre, LIFT, what a lovely name, Lactation, Infant Feeding and Translation. Lovely. And Amy has a wide following, and she has conducted some wonderful, fabulous research. Amy, over to you.
Thank you, Marlene. Good morning, everybody, or good evening if you are joining us from somewhere like Australia, where I knew quite a few people were interested in joining today. I'm going to really set the scene for a lot of the later talks this morning by talking about what breastfeeding means to women. So why it's important, not just in terms of infant health and health protection, which is what we often talk about, but what it actually means to women and how they can feel when it doesn't go as planned. Now, obviously, women aren't some uniform creature who all feel exactly the same way. And here I'm very much talking about women who want to breastfeed. So women for whom breastfeeding is important to them and why it's important to them over and above just the reasons you might see on a public health poster. So we know from the wide body of research evidence now that when breastfeeding goes really well for women, so when they want to breastfeed their baby and they manage to breastfeed them and for as long as they want, and they're not battling pain or difficulties or any other troubles, we know those women actually have their mental health protected. So we know they have a lower risk of postnatal depression. We know they have more esteem and confidence around caring for their baby in general and just lower anxiety. So we know if it works really well for them as well. But we also know when it goes wrong, it can be catastrophic for women. It's not just in terms of the physical pain they can experience or the difficulty, it's how it leaves them feeling and how it interacts with their mental health and their confidence as parents. And unfortunately, we know that far too many women are ending up in this second category. We know from research that the vast majority of women who want to breastfeed but stop breastfeeding in the early weeks usually aren't ready to do so. They're doing so for reasons that are outside their control. They're in too much pain. They can't get the support they need. Something is stopping them. And we know that can be really damaging. And you'll hear about that in more detail in later talks. But for me, in my research, I've talked to, through my research now, tens of thousands of women over the years, and really thinking about this idea of loss, of grief. And it's not just about the protection of their baby, it's something wider, it's something much deeper. Now, this is my little stick figure man here coming along and asking women, you know, why did you want to breastfeed? And I've asked this question so many times in research over the years. You're saying to women, okay, so why was breastfeeding important to you? And it's almost like there's a script. It's almost like women feel at first that they have to give the answer. Oh, it protects my baby. It reduces my baby's risk of infections. It supports their health. It's good for my baby. You know, the posters encourage us to. It's good for babies. But then actually, if you give them time and you say, yeah, but what else? Why else is it important? They will actually say, well, actually, it's important to me as well. It's important that I was able to breastfeed. And I think it's really important that we listen to that and we hear them, and we know that it's all right for women to say that breastfeeding matters to them because of them. They don't not matter in this mother-baby dyad. They are important as well. It's not all just about the baby. So we spent a lot of time now talking to women about, well, what are those reasons? Why does breastfeeding actually matter to you? And there are so many reasons that we often don't think about, so many that aren't written in those public health documents, so many that we sort of ignore, saying to women, oh, why are you wanting, why does breastfeeding matter to you? Aren't you just a bit selfish wanting to do it for just you? Because of course we generally treat women like that when it comes to their body. But there are so many reasons when you start thinking about it. So the very first one is we know that when breastfeeding is working well, it helps protect mothers physically. There are lots of reasons for this, but it's around the hormonal pattern that women have and what's happening to their body when they're breastfeeding after birth. So when I talk about the body doing what it expects after birth, I don't mean in any way that's some kind of social imperative that all women should be breastfeeding their babies and we should demand that they all do. But from a physiological perspective, biologically, evolutionary wise, the body will be expecting to have the pattern of breastfeeding after birth. And those hormones help the mother, even though it might sometimes not seem like it at the time. They help her to get more sleep. They help to calm her. They help support her and her stress levels. There's some very interesting research that Kathy Kendall-Tackett in the States has talked about and published a lot about around how the hormones of breastfeeding seem to help protect women against the stresses of having a baby. So if you think about stress as being a reaction in your body, and you have a reaction in your body when you're overwhelmed, when you're not getting enough sleep, when you're worried about things. And one of the stress reactions is that we can get very inflamed. And we know that that inflammation in our body is linked to all sorts of physical health issues. Research has shown that breastfeeding women seem to be protected against that in some way. It's something about the hormones that seems to reduce the inflammation response they have in relation to stress. There's research that shows that when mothers are breastfeeding, and particularly after the early weeks, they actually get more sleep at night. I know that sometimes sounds hard to believe, but studies that have tracked mothers and babies sleeping through the night actually show that breastfeeding helps the baby get back to sleep quicker, and it also helps the mother get back to sleep quicker as well. Because even though there might be more time involved in the night in feeding the baby, the whole process is much quicker. So you don't even maybe have to get up to feed your baby. You certainly don't have to get up and make a bottle. You don't have to settle them back to sleep again. So we know that it helps mothers and babies, particularly at night. We also know that breastfeeding is a way of mothering. And again, by this, I am never saying that it's the only way of mothering. I'm not saying it's the only way of bonding with a baby, but it is certainly a form of doing it. And although, again, it may not seem like it if you've just had a baby and you're in the early weeks and you're trying to get to grips with feeding this little creature and they're learning how to feed as well. But once it's clicked, once a milk supply is well established, once it's going well, one of the biggest things that women talk about is convenience. It's easier once you get past those early weeks. You don't have to worry about making sure that you've bought all the different bits in the formula. You don't have to worry that, you can't accidentally leave your breasts at home, can you? You can't go out without it. It's always there. It's quick. It's easy. And that is really important. And sometimes I think we're far too quick to criticize women for saying that, when actually it really helps them as mothers. There's lots of very interesting research as well around maternal identity and bonding with babies, particularly premature babies. The research, there's quite a lot done in Sweden and Norway and those regions that has looked at mothers who have had a premature baby and they've had a very difficult birth and their baby has been separated from them. And they talk about breastfeeding as a way of reconnecting with the baby, a way of their body working when they think their body may have let them down or failed during the birth, which of course it hasn't, but they may be feeling that way. It's a way of reclaiming their baby, because often mothers in neonatal units feel that the baby has been taken away, that the staff are in control of their baby and own their baby as such. But being able to give the baby milk and eventually being able to breastfeed that baby is really important for them psychologically. We also know, and anybody who has breastfed a baby, and particularly if you've breastfed a toddler, you will know as well that it is a mothering tool. It is a way of connecting with a baby. It's calming them, it's soothing them. We sometimes forget that breastfeeding isn't just about the milk. Babies are programmed to want to suck, to get comfort. It's about the skin to skin, it's about the connection. And some research that I did a few years ago, which I haven't actually quite got around to publishing yet, but it was actually asking mothers, why do you feed your baby? Other than, well, my baby's hungry, they need milk. And it's really looking at this idea that mothers who are breastfeeding, and particularly breastfeeding exclusively, it was really a form of caring for that baby. So they breastfed them for comfort. They breastfed them because they were crying, because they were unsettled, to help them get back to sleep, just to soothe them, to reconnect with them, or just because. And one of the questions that I asked within this was, when you breastfeed your baby for one of those reasons, how does it feel? Does it feel different? Can you describe it to me? And mothers were talking about the suck being different. It wasn't about getting lots of milk out. It was about the comfort and the connection, and the feeds were often quite quick. And when women then can't breastfeed, they lose all of this. They lose the connective tool with their baby. They lose the way of caring for them. I looked after a friend's baby for about an hour in pre-COVID times. Can you imagine that? Actually holding someone else's baby. Looked after them for about an hour. And I was like, I just don't know what to do with this baby because I can't breastfeed them. You know, how do I settle the baby that I can't feed? Because I was so used to just being able to use that as a tool. And this is a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but there were some memes I was making for social media the other day about the real benefits of breastfeeding to women, and they are tongue-in-cheek, you know, that they're meant to be taken in a humorous way. But, you know, it's things like, if you want to avoid annoying relatives, you can take yourself off somewhere to feed, as he feeds better with no distractions. You know, it is a way of connection. It isn't just about getting the milk in them. So when women can't breastfeed, they may be very, very grateful that there is an alternative. We know babies need formula if they can't be breastfed, and they can be really grateful for that, and be grateful they don't live in a region without unclean water and not being able to sanitize it, but they still lose the whole experience of caring for their baby. I also met a number of women over the years who talk about breastfeeding as being a way of healing. So we've already talked about a difficult birth, or if they're separated from their baby. But one of the interesting things that I've found over the years is how breastfeeding can sometimes help women when they have a lot of trauma around their body and their body image. And this woman here in particular had an eating disorder. And just to read you her quote, I remember hating my body since I was about 4 and feeling like I needed to punish myself through punishing it. My main thoughts about my body were all about how I was going to binge and purge and hurt it, and alternatively try to starve it. When my daughter was born, I didn't really mean to breastfeed, but thought I would give her a feed, and something in me just clicked. I was using my body in a positive way, and she was literally thriving in front of me, growing bigger and stronger. She was such a happy baby, and I wonder if it helped connect everything. I'm not fully healed and not sure I ever will be, but my experience of breastfeeding her helped me to start seeing my body in a different, more powerful and useful way. And we forget it is about women's bodies. It's not just about the milk in them. It's about them. It's their body image. It's their identity. There are also, if you start looking into different religious and cultural texts, there are so many references to breastfeeding in Hinduism, in Islam, in Christianity. There are so many messages around babies being breastfed, even direct reference to a baby in the Quran about babies should be breastfed for 2 years, the mother should be breastfeeding, and the father should be supporting her to do that. In Hinduism, here breast milk is life-giving. For example, when the god Shiva creates Bhavati, a boy out of a dress, he only comes to life when she puts him to her breast. Now, if women have strong religious beliefs and culturally engaged in their religion, then breastfeeding may be important to them for these reasons as well. And it's something we often don't consider. Also talking to Kimberly Sills-Allers as well, author of The Big Letdown in the United States, and her really talking about the importance of breastfeeding for Black women in the States. And just her quote here, "Black breastfeeding is a revolutionary act, an act of resistance in and of itself. When Black women breastfeed, they are reversing narratives, reclaiming traditions that were taken from them, countering stereotypes, and re-establishing the infant feeding norm in our communities. For Black women, breastfeeding creates sisterhood and community as we develop peer models of support where larger systems have failed us." So she's very much talking about the history of slavery and wet nursing and all the impact of that over the years, and about reclaiming history, reclaiming bodies. And you read that and you still ask women, well, why does this matter to you? You can just give your baby formula. And it's not just about that. So many cultural and social ties. And another thing that often comes up is when women are exhausted. Often the first thing that people say to them is like, look, stop breastfeeding. If you just stop breastfeeding, give them a bottle, it'll all be easier. I can feed the baby for you. Usually when someone says I can feed the baby for you, they mean at 3 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon. They do not mean every night at 3 a.m. But often, just because women are finding something tough doesn't mean they want to stop doing it. I mean, we do stuff all the time that is tough. We run marathons, we do PhDs, we do all sorts of things that, you know, somebody might say, why on earth are you doing that? But it doesn't mean that we want to stop doing them. And this is such a common quote. I was absolutely exhausted and overwhelmed with it all. And a few people suggested I give up breastfeeding to get a break. I felt like a useless mother in so many other ways, but the breastfeeding was the part I really loved and felt like I was doing a good job at. It helped me stop, escape, and just be whilst I was feeding. It was all the other things I wanted to escape from, and stopping breastfeeding wouldn't solve that. And another quote here, I hated my life, I hated myself. I thought I was a terrible, useless mother apart from breastfeeding. That was the one thing I was getting right. Why did everyone want to take that away from me? And she was a mother who had really bad postnatal depression. And she felt that for her, breastfeeding was one thing she was doing. She could see her baby growing and thriving. And it was a sign to her that her baby needed her. And pretty much the only thing between thinking she should give that baby up to be adopted because she was such an awful mother. Of course, she wasn't an awful mother. But often the first thing people want to do to help a mother is feed the baby. Can we not have a culture where we come in and say, right, let's feed the mother instead? Look, you're exhausted, I'll come along, I'm going to do the housework for you, or I'm going to hire you a cleaner, or I'm going to send you a meal delivery service. Feeding the baby isn't the bit that needs doing. It's all the other stuff. You know, the mother is sitting down while she's feeding. What happens when visitors come round? Remember that as well, visitors after a new baby around your house. What happens? Someone comes in, wants to hold the baby while the mum gets up and makes everybody tea. No, let's stop that. You come in, you make the tea for the mother. And a really big point for me is this question, you know, how many times are women told, right, okay, you just can't breastfeed. Lots of women can't breastfeed. Yeah, you want to breastfeed, but you're having too many problems. Don't worry about it. Just give them formula. When there are two messages to that. One, you know, I may not want to give my baby formula, but the second unspoken part of that is somebody is going along to the doctor and they're saying, no, you just can't breastfeed. Without any follow-up to say, why on earth are we not investigating why women's bodies aren't working? If we supposedly have this idea that lots of women can't breastfeed, then why on earth are we just stopping at the end of that sentence? Why is there not a whole field in the UK of lactation medicine, breastfeeding medicine? Why can a woman go to a doctor and say that this part of my body isn't working? And everyone just goes, oh, all right, yeah, it often doesn't. I can't imagine that for any other scenario. And I've often said it a lot, you know, men wouldn't go along to the doctor with erectile dysfunction and get told the same messages. They wouldn't be told things like, oh, you know what, someone just can't, or, you know, you've been doing that long enough for now, or, you know, here's a different alternative you can use. Those messages just wouldn't be the same. And it's getting back to women wanting their body to work and that being all right. They want answers. And why aren't we able to give it to them? Breastfeeding is a reproductive right. It helps protect women's mental health. It helps protect their physical health. We know on a population level, when women breastfeed, they have lower risks of reproductive cancers. They have lower risks of heart disease, of diabetes. So women's bodies matter. It's not just about the baby. And we need to start changing the narrative around that, and for there being more tests, for there being more investment into understanding breastfeeding and when breastfeeding doesn't work for the sake of women, not just the sake of babies. And coming to my last point really is this: we mustn't invalidate emotions in all of this. So many women get told that when they can't breastfeed or when they're really struggling, that it doesn't matter. And it's not fair. We need to recognize how women are feeling and understand that if they can't breastfeed their baby, then okay, they might be very grateful that there is an alternative, but it doesn't fix the rest of it. And by saying, I really wanted to breastfeed, it's not a criticism of anybody else. It's a statement that breastfeeding was really important to me, and I wanted support around that. And just bringing to my final slide here, just some points. So formula might fix the issue of feeding the baby, which is of course important, but it doesn't necessarily fix the mother as well. And that's all right to say, I'm grieving not being able to breastfeed my baby, but I'm very grateful that my baby is being fed. When people tell the mother, look, fed is best, the main thing is your baby is being fed, then that invalidates how she's feeling. To me, it's the same of telling women who've had a traumatic birth, oh, well, look, your baby's healthy. What are you complaining about? We're allowed to be simultaneously grateful for a healthy baby, but also grieve our own experiences and be affected by them. Her feelings are not a criticism of other people's choices or decisions. They are simply it. It's saying breastfeeding is really important to me is absolutely the same to me as saying, look, I really enjoy running. It's not a criticism of people who are not running or people who prefer playing tennis. It is just a statement of what breastfeeding means to women. And just to leave you here, so investing in breastfeeding matters because women matter. It's not just about the baby, it's about women and how they feel too. So thank you, Marlene.
Yes, thank you. Amy, you're a breath of fresh air and you say it so well. No, it's just absolutely lovely. Thank you so much. But the issues you're talking about are so, so important. You've had quite a few questions have come in. Now, we don't have time to answer them all, but people have been asking, first of all, is it possible getting a copy of your slides? So I've said I'll ask you. Yeah, and the second, then there are a couple of questions here in relation to research. Is there any research on the benefits of breastfeeding for toddlers or for those beyond infancy? And I can't pronounce the name of the beautiful girl. Cinderella Jezebel Chirian. Do you know who that girl is? No, that's the name of the person who's asking that question. So have you got a chance, Amy, just to tell us, is there any research, or are you going to be doing any research in relation to the benefits of breastfeeding for toddlers and beyond infancy?
There has been some very interesting research that's led by Imperial College, Dr. Natalie Schenker. She's a UKRI fellow and she's co-founder of the Human Milk Foundation. They did some research, led some research with the Parenting Science Gang last year, a couple of years ago now, that I believe will be published soon. They were looking at the content of breast milk for mothers who are feeding an older baby, because there is very little done on it. The little research that there is shows that, well, of course, breast milk is breast milk, it stays as breast milk. So all the properties and protective values of it are still there as the baby gets older. The little bit of research that has been published seems to show that the antibodies seem to increase as babies get older, which makes a lot of sense because they're off crawling and stuff. And I think it always comes back to the, breastfeeding is the biological norm. It is protective because it's the biological norm. It's what we're designed to do. So having to prove that, it's the milk that is designed for our species. So of course it is still protective.
Thank you very much, Amy. I'm going to have to leave the questions there, and Amy will send them to you, and people hopefully will be able to get a copy of your slides. Thank you very much, Amy.